Someone in town needed exactly what you sell this week, but this time they didn't open Google. They asked their AI who is the best in their area and got back 3 names. Maybe you were one of the 3, maybe you weren't. But for the last 20 years, being found meant getting Google to notice you. We learned everything we could about their algorithm and worked to be the top result on the first page. That is what we call SEO. But now there is new technology in the block. More and more people are using AI to ask questions and find tailored solutions to their problem. And this has caused a new acronym to show up in marketing: GEO, Generative Engine Optimization. Optimizing your business for AI results. In this episode, we'll talk about how to get found, what has changed in this AI search era, and how to do it all without sacrificing your humanity. My name is Jiun, and this is Antiviral, a human approach to marketing. All right, welcome everybody. And in this episode, I want to talk a little bit more about AI because, again, it's something that the last episode touched on. And I wanted to delve into one of the most common questions that keeps being asked of me, which is now more and more people are obviously using AI. Also, a lot of business owners are doing this themselves. They're searching AI instead of asking or searching through Google, and are asking how to get found because now things are changing. And it's true, they are changing. So I wanted to touch on this as clearly as I possibly can. And I want to give you a little bit of knowledge as to how it came to play, how all of this came into place, if you will, because SEO and a lot of these things that we can talk about marketing, for example, I can give you advice on what to do now. And next year, that might not be the case anymore, right? It's always changing, especially AI. AI is always changing because we are in its infancy stage, if you will. So I didn't want to give an entire episode on something that just it's never going to be used in the future. So instead, I wanted to have this episode be a little bit more about concepts that were true like way before even Google was a thing, and that will most likely be true in the future as AI takes its place in the SEO, space, in the marketing space, and finds the, place to be, if you will, within it. I think I'd first like to start by talking about this little AI experiment that I did where I opened a brand new Claude account. And then I asked it several questions because I wanted to figure out how it is that it searches for things without any historical input. Because as most people know, or as you would know, AI keeps records and keeps history of what you do in your account, right? So it kind of figures out what you like and what you don't like and what it is that you do and how you view things. And then it tries to tailor its responses based on how you do this, based on this history that it has of you. So I wanted a brand new account just to see what it would do blank, sight unseen, without other external factors, how it was trained to provide search answers, if you will. And the first question that I asked it was, what are the best pizza places in my area? Right. And I got 3 names, which is great. Then I asked it why it picked these as the top 3 to show me. Right. Very simple, nothing crazy. That was exactly the answer, the question that I asked. And essentially what it came down is it told me that it picked those 3 based on the combined rating of reviews. So it did a lot of thinking, if you want to call it thinking, but it looked at what are the pizza places in the area. And then it kind of combed through the ones that had, let's say, 5 stars, but had very few volume of reviews, like 14 reviews, right? And it paired that against another restaurant that had a slightly lower review rating, let's say 4.7 in this case, it gave me as the example, but it had over 1,000, reviews. So it ranked that as higher. And it did that for all the ones that it could. And then it gave me the top 3, right, based on everything that it was. It also looked at how the reviews were. Like, were they mostly positive? Were they mostly, talking about great things about it, etc.? It talked about, it selected it based on restaurants that did pizza really well based on what the reviews were talking about, not just the ambiance, not just, they had great servers, but the fact that they talked about how they made pizza really good or people enjoyed their pizza. And the last one was also something interesting, which was around, do these people make pizza as their main food option, if you will, not just restaurants that have it as an option, but this is their main thing, their bread and butter. This is their thing that they do, right? They are a pizza place. They're not just a restaurant that happens to serve pizza. And that is how it gave me those answers. And I found that really, really fascinating. And we're going to talk about this, right? And how it kind of matches and merges with how people are searching for nowadays and how you can do this yourself. But then I wanted to expand a little bit more because I know, for example, when I'm talking about a local area, then it does very much use information from whatever is most locally relevant. And most locally relevant is going to be reviews and Google Business Profile, right? I'm sure everybody that listens to this knows that in order to get ranked locally and highly, you want to be on the Google Maps feature, right? Which is getting Google Business Profile and having reviews and having a lot of reviews consistently, etc. Now, I wanted to expand beyond that because I wanted to see what it would give me if this was not tied to local at all. So I asked it what were the best office chairs because I am in need of a good office chair. Just frankly, mine is starting to die. So I was like, okay, so what are the best office chairs? And again, it gave me 3 answers. Actually, it gave me 4 now that I'm looking at it. It gave me 4 answers. And then I asked the exact same thing. Why? Now, this is where it starts getting interesting because the reasoning that it gave me, the main primary reason that it gave me was consensus across resources, across sources. That's what it called it. So essentially, it means that this brand and this type of chair, or this chair in particular, was being mentioned multiple times across many different places or many different reviews, many different places around the internet, and all of them usually around positive results, right? So it merged that into a higher quality item. The second one was matching the picks that it gave me based on use case and budget. So essentially what it gave me was one that was just overall good, right? One that if you have all the money in the world, it gave me the most expensive one, which happened to be a Herman Miller, a mid-range one, and then a budget one, right? If I wanted something as cheaply as possible. So it matched it based on use case and budget. And it went through all the research for all the different sections that it did. And then the last one was reviewer credibility. So a lot of the reason why it picked certain ones was because it looked at a lot of websites where people specifically talked about this item, which happens to be reviewer website because most other places don't talk about the item. They just say they have it on sale as an example. If you go to Walmart, you go to Amazon, they just have it on sale. So it specifically looked at websites that were describing how it felt and how it looked and all these kinds of things. And then it matched that with, is this website or is this review or whoever it was credible, right? It came from a reputable source. And based on all of these things combined, that's what it gave me as the answers. And I think this points exactly to where SEO and GEO, for that matter, are in today's day and age, and where it's going to continue to go. So let me explain what I just described here a little bit. So a lot of people think about SEO, right, as Google, right? Ranking, and that is exactly what it is. Google, SEO is essentially trying to figure out how to rank as highly as possible on something. But GEO, being this new fancy name, people don't really understand how it works quite yet, right? And they're trying to figure out and they're trying to learn what it is. And I think that there are some marketers that are trying to differentiate between the two. They're saying that SEO and GEO are two separate things, whereas I disagree. I think that both of them are actually uh, part of the same structure, and GEO being more of an upgrade to SEO rather than something completely different because it uses the same exact template, if you want to call it that. And the template that I mean is actually something that Google created, which is called Google EAT, EEAT. That's the acronym, and it stands for expertise, experience, authority, and trust. Now, Google gave these as references so that anybody that with a website could figure out how to create the best experience and the best ranking ability for their website. And they all mean slightly different things. Um, but what I like to kind of narrow them down to is authority, content, and experience. I find that just a little bit easier to explain. But it comes from the exact same source, right? So let me explain what these mean. So authority, meaning the main one, and I would say one of the strongest ranking signals, is essentially how the web is supposed to operate. So authority essentially is when somebody links to your website from their website. If somebody links to you, right? Think of it similar to what do you call it? Referrals, right? If somebody else gives you a referral, then that person tends to create or be a warmer lead, if you want to call them that, a warmer response, and chances are you're going to get business out of it because they come from a trusted source, right? It works in a similar way with SEO. Authority is essentially that. When somebody else links to your website, Google reads that as, okay, that website that linked to you, they trust you in some way, right? And if there are enough websites that trust you, then chances are you are someone to be trusted. So it's going to boost you up in the rankings because it feels like you are a trusted source. That's all it really means. And a lot of people, and you can see this very clearly in the example that we were talking about, how it was trying to figure out, especially when it comes to the chairs, but it was trying to figure out what are what is being said consistently throughout many websites, right? And if there is a general consensus, if it finds your link or if it finds you on several multiple websites, it also generates that trust, right? And the next one is content. And content is something that everybody knows with SEO in particular is keywords. That's just how it works, right? And there are a lot of things that we can talk about keywords, but essentially it all boils down to trying to get Google to understand what this website is about, essentially, right? And Google doesn't really, search engines in general, really, but Google doesn't really look for, it doesn't understand the semantics of the sentences of how you're writing or anything, et cetera, like that. What it does is it looks at keywords. And if there are enough keywords about a certain category, as an example, right? If you're talking about watches and you're talking about sunglasses, you're talking about makeup, as an example, it's going to assume that, oh, okay, so you're in fashion in some way. So any search related features, anybody that searches something around fashion, maybe you sit somewhere around there. And the more keywords it has, the more it's able to identify and figure out what you are and be able to give you more of the right audience or more of the right clicks that is going to convert and then boost you up in the ranking because you know your audience, right? You know exactly what is it that people are searching for and asking about, and you're being that answer. That is the point of content. It has changed over many years, right, to be something different, but that is essentially the concept of it. And the last one is experience. And I talked about this a little bit, but Google really, really cares about the user experience. If somebody has a bad experience using Google as an example, right, they're not going to want to use Google again because not only can I not find my answer, but whenever I search, whenever I click on a link as an example, I get taken to a website that takes forever to load or that has a million ads that I have to like X out of, right? And all these different things, or like the buttons are broken, or I can't scroll, or I can't see properly, right? Because the website itself is broken, or it's neon green, and that makes it so that people just don't have a good experience. And Google really, really cares about that. So a lot of the algorithm updates that it has done over time is about improving user experience. Just simple as that, right? And hopefully you can start seeing from our examples some of how it comes into play. A lot of people see, let's go back to the pizza example, right? But a lot of people see Google Business Profile, right, and reviews as a very important ranking factor for their SEO. And that's not entirely true as an example. But it is true in that if you want to rank on Google Maps, right, then reviews are very important because Google Maps essentially in Google Business Profile is essentially a separate type of ranking factor than your standard SEO, which is for your website. The other one is for that profile that holds the reviews, right? And SEO in general is about your website. So those are two distinctions to make, but they function with different signals, but they essentially do the same thing, which is giving you, a better position, right? If you do things properly, if you are a good business in general. One of the things that I think a lot of people do, and we've talked about this before in the past, but something that a lot of people do is we focus a lot on optimizing for the algorithm, especially in SEO, gaming the system, trying to find what the advantage is that we can like do so that it boosts us up into the rankings as quickly as possible. That is essentially what SEO is nowadays. And a lot of people forget that in order to get clients, in order to actually get your stuff read, like if you have blogs as an example, or if you have a page on your website that you want people to read, catering to a machine is not going to give people the trust or the impetus to actually try to read this because it's not meant for them. That is the main distinction that I try to make when it comes to, marketing and website overall, but is the idea that you should be writing for someone else, for the sake of someone else, not for a machine, to provide value, right? Because if you think about it, SEO and GEO is going to, that we're going to talk about, but it's essentially the exact same thing. Everything about SEO is about providing value because when somebody searches for something, whether it's through AI or whether it's through Google, they're trying to ask a question because it's something they don't know, right? They're trying to ask a question, and you essentially want to be the best answer, not only for your own business, but you want to be the best answer, period. That is what providing value means, right? In the world of digital marketing. So it's asking yourself the questions of like, what would they search? What would they ask? What do they need to know? And what is valuable for them to understand? Because sometimes, I would say a lot of the times, people don't know what it is that they're seeking for, right? They assume it's one thing, but it ends up being something else. So it's not just about thinking when you're creating content or when you're trying to figure out what it is that you want to say on a page, but what is it that they ask? But it's also what is it that they don't ask? What is it that they should know or understand, right? That they just haven't stumbled upon yet. And in order for us to really dive into the core basic understandings, which is, content, experience, and authority, is let me give you a brief history of the internet. So, as far as I could tell, Justin Hall is largely recognized as starting the earliest blog there was in 1994 while he was a student. And by 1999, there was this blogger called Rebecca Blood that noted that there were only 23 blogs in existence at that point. Now, we don't know if that's true. I don't think anybody was actually tracking, if you will, at the time. But if you want to see the past, if you will, go back in a time machine and look at how websites used to be. I'm pretty sure this is the original website, but you can go to her site. It's called RebeccaBlood.net. So Rebecca with 2 C's and then blood, right? Like blood, .net. And you're going to be able to see just how fun, how interesting, and how simple websites were back then. Around this time, between 1984 and 1999, right, people were just writing and were blogging, and it became this entire ecosystem. It was this entire thing. People loved to do this, and they would talk to each other through their own blogs and would leave comments. It was freedom, if you will. That was the point of the internet. And then at some point in 1997, the term search engine optimization came into place. The term can be dated back to John Audette, I hope I'm saying that properly, of Multimedia Marketing Group. And in that same year, 1997, search engines, predating Google, by the way, early search engines, were already seeing the problems of SEO. So people were already trying to game the system even back then. They were stuffing keywords, which means putting a lot of keywords in one page. Let's say you want to rank for fireplace. So you put fireplace basically in every other word, if you want to call it that, right? That's called keyword stuffing. It's essentially incoherent, but to try and game the algorithm, right? The algorithm doesn't care what it is. The algorithm just looks for keywords. So let's just give it keywords. Another problem that they were seeing in these search engines at the time was that people were actually stuffing it with keywords in general, whether it was relevant to the page or not. So, the reality is that a lot of people, once the algorithms started coming into place, right, to try and rank people and define what website is better for what answer, if you will, they would try to just simply stuff keywords left, right, and center for relevant things. Like even if your blog was about plants, right, you would put keywords on rock and roll, you would put keywords on woodworking, you would put keywords on, I don't know, whatever, right? Because they wanted to be seen. And you'd think, right, the only way to be seen was to rank. So you just do whatever it takes to rank. And that's kind of how SEO started coming into play. Google, funnily enough, launched in 1998, and it had the exact same problem as all the other search engines. It's just that's the one that's stuck for a long time. The first major update to crack down on this keyword stuffing concept actually came in 2003. There was quite a while, as the internet started proliferating before people would crack down on these issues, right? So a lot of this kind of has maintained this idea that I need to do whatever it takes to just rank, period, right? And it moved people away. If you think about it, it moved people away from writing for the joy of writing and interacting with other people and into figuring out how the algorithm worked and what to do for the algorithm. And that is what tanked the blogging community. People love to go and blogs were live back then. You could scroll down into the comments and have like hundreds of comments, and people were talking through it and asking questions and, all sorts of things. And then blogging just essentially disappeared. Now blogging is a desert, right? Most or a lot of websites still have blogs, still blog about it. But when was the last time you actually get, an actual response from an actual person that isn't spam on the comments? You don't get that anymore because people just aren't writing for people. And we're kind of seeing the same thing with GEO right now. And GEO, for a lot of people that don't know, is called Generative Engine Optimization. That's the technical term for it. And everybody right now, as I mentioned before, is scrambling and figuring out what to do. People are confused as to how to deal with it. And that's where kind of the conundrum comes in, right? But let's take this back as well to the start of everything, even though it's very recent history. Generative engine optimization. Actually, the term came from a paper by, and I'm going to butcher this name, Agarwal. Yes, Aggarwal and colleagues at Princeton. This paper was published in 2024. And they essentially did a paper on this new AI thing, right? And how it found things similar to what I just did. I explained to you in a very simple example, but they just went a lot deeper with it, right? And let me give you a few of the key points of what this paper found. And this was the paper that kind of brought GEO into existence, the term GEO into existence, and brought everything that we are starting to understand about GEO actually essentially comes from this paper. So they found that adding to their blogs, or to pages in general, right? They found that adding verifiable statistics, credible quotations, and citations produce 30 to 40% gains in AI visibility. So if you ever want to be found, right, through AI a lot more, having verifiable statistics, credible quotations, and citations would be good. Essentially writing a paper that has a lot of the web that we talked about, authority, if you will, where you are linking to other people, and essentially other people are linking to you. That's kind of why it's called the World Wide Web. And the other point that they found was that improving readability of a page actually gained 15 to 30% in AI visibility. Now, readability essentially is making it more readable for a human, not more readable for AI, but readable for a human in general. And there's a lot of little things about that. I'm not going to get into it, but it's essentially writing for people. And the last point that I will say is manipulation tactics, like keyword stuffing, as an example, that they tried had no effect or even negative effects on AI visibility. So this is why I think that GEO is actually an upgrade to SEO in its place, even though they're for two different systems. But it's because AI actually cares about a lot of the same things that SEO cares about. The algorithms are actually very similar. Why? Because they want to be the best answer for people. It's just that before, SEO's algorithm, if you want to call it, based on keywords and ranking, was actually a very primitive version because we didn't have the technology to do what AI can do now, which is you give it context. You say, okay, what are the best pizza places in X location? I have 15 minutes, so this needs to be within 10-minute block radius of me so that I can go walk, buy the pizza, come back, as an example, right? You can give all of that information, and the AI can put that through and search in a way that gives you the answer that you're looking for more specifically. Whereas SEO and the algorithm of Google back in the day didn't have that. You could only say best restaurants near me, and it would just like give you whatever was near you, sometimes close, sometimes farther away. And there wouldn't be a way for you to discern how far, how long, what are the best ones, like, or don't give me anything, just the top three as an example, right? It can't do that, but AI can. And that's the reason why it's being used more often than not. And because it's new, you get a glimpse into how the whole ecosystem should be. That's the interesting that part that I find the most interesting about this entire um, episode and about this entire thing is that how the internet should have been this entire time before SEO, before GEO, all of this. It was meant to be a place where you could find and interact with people. That is the essence of everything. And now that GEO is in place, and now that you'd probably be asking, what are those things that you need to do apart from the paper, right? That I just mentioned in order to rank for AI visibility more, is to essentially provide value. I go back to that same thing: provide value, answer people's question accurately, and with a point of view that reflects what your audience is searching for. Again, because this is a very common thing, people give AI a lot more context, usually, right? And this context is based on what they think and what they want, right? So you don't have to worry about targeting or being the right answer for everybody, because more often than not, AI is not going to give a generic answer. It's going to give a tailored answer to this person who the AI has an AI, like a search history for already, and it knows what it likes, and it knows what it wants, and it knows what it's looking for. So all of this in play, have a point of view that aligns with your audience, with certain groups of people, not for everyone. Because if you are generic and going to try to cater, right, and be visible to everybody, AI is not going to pay attention to you, because it's just not that relevant, as opposed to other websites that are a lot more relevant, because it's specifically what few people want, right? And it's about finding those. And, make it easy for people to skim the article for an answer. People are busy nowadays, right? And AI works the exact same way. If you give it an easy place, like key takeaways right at the start of the blog, right, to tell people what this is for, the AI will also read them and be like, perfect, I know that this article has the answer or doesn't have the answer because of the key takeaway, as an example. It likes that. So it's the same thing. And if people want to read in depth, right, then you have the article there that they can search for and look for and read through if they're interested, right? And then to provide people with context, provide people with more information that they can dive into next. I think this is something that a lot of people just never think about when it comes to SEO or GEO in general. But essentially, you want to create a rabbit hole. I give this as an example because it's actually very recent. It happened, like 3, 4 days ago. But I started watching, I searched for on YouTube for a historical channel. And I found this one called The Life Guide. I don't know why I picked it. I did. But I started getting interested in old Greek mythology again, mainly because the Odyssey is around, right? It's new and shiny, the movie. So everybody's talking about it. It kind of made me want to get uh, the summary of all the books that I had read like a long, long time ago. So I found this channel and I started watching their summary, essentially, of these books by Homer. And I started with Iliad, right? So that I had context to go and watch the one about the Odyssey. And then after the Odyssey, I just started to stumble upon more videos that were about, Heracles and like the Argonauts and the fall of the Bronze Age and all these things that were just added onto around that same era. That I was like, okay, this is really interesting. Like, I find this really curious, that I sort of knew, but not really knew, etc. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But the algorithm, right, gave me more to see for somebody that was already interested in Greek mythology. And this is exactly the point that I'm trying to make for SEO and GEO, is that a lot of people, when they're writing for their blogs or writing for their website, is to have a point of view for a specific type of audience, a specific type of person, and then give them more, a rabbit hole, if you will. Give them more stuff that they can dive into the next thing that follows the next one. If you're interested in learning about this, then you're going to be interested in learning about something else that is slightly related to, or slightly, and give them and keep people hooked, because the entire point that the algorithms always reward is long time on a page and clicking with a purpose. Clicking and spending a lot of time on a page, right, is a signal that the algorithms know, like, this is something good. This is something worthwhile. This is a good website, right? And you can think about the same thing as social media as well, but sharing, commenting, all these kinds of things, all these signals that tell the algorithms that something good is happening. Really, what you want is provide valuable content, because that will always come to the surface for the right people that want it. People will always search for those things. If you know your audience really well, they will end up searching for these things and will find you and will click on it and have things that will keep them on that website for longer, which is exactly what you want, because you're also building trust around that. That's all this is. And the problem that we have found ourselves in, right, is that everybody, when they think of SEO or GEO for now, is everybody is looking to become famous. Similar as those early bloggers that started to keyword stuff and game the algorithm because they were looking to become famous. And this has stayed as a barometer for some reason up to this point. They're trying to attract everyone and be at the top of Google for everything, and be recommended, the recommended answer on AI for everyone across the world. How crazy is that? And you generalize content, as I was saying, right? You generalize content so that the algorithm will potentially pick you up. But by you generalizing the content, it makes your content less relevant to the people, right? And you're trying to fight against, let's say, the Amazons or the Wikipedias of the world, because you're trying to be everybody, right? You're trying to be the best solution for everybody, or the best website for everybody, not understanding that you're really never going to beat them, right? You don't have the resources for that. And even if you happen to win the lottery and game the algorithm and put you in front of Wikipedia or Amazon as an example, and people click on your website, do you think they're going to get the same value that they get on the other site? Do you think they're going to care about your website? They're not, right? This is an interesting statistic that Evertune, a company, right, their analysis of 200 million prompts, and they found that the most cited domain on any platform rarely exceeds 5% of total citations. The other 95% is spread across the thousands of domains. What this means is that the big search people, the big search websites like Reddit, Wikipedia, that sort of thing, all of those really only amount to about 5% of total citations, right? Most of the citations out there that AI does is spread across everyone, every other website in the world. And I will give you this um, very straight answer, if you will, that GEO does not care about your ranking. It does not care about your algorithm or SEO ranking one bit. What it cares about is being the best answer for what people are asking for. That is what it cares about, which is why it looks for a lot more information and distributes their engine and their sub agents across a bunch of domains to try and find what the right answer is, because it's not going to take one thing at face value. It's going to give you the average, if you will, of what everybody says is the right thing. So you can't really game the system in that way anymore, right? And SEO, and by this token, GEO, should be seen as trying to attract the right audience and keeping them engaged over time, right? Just as I said, SEO is about ranking, GEO is about answers. But marketing overall is about being valuable to another person. To generate enough trust that they remember you and buy from you. That's what these algorithms are, and that's what they should be for. Thank you for listening to this episode of Antiviral. And if you have a little bit of time, I would really love it if you reviewed on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts, wherever you're listening from, to just leave a review. It really helps this episode, and it really helps the podcast grow. And if you have any issues or you have any questions that you want answered in a future episode, just go to my website and contact me. I am happy to talk, and I'm happy to build episodes around what people actually want to listen to. So thank you very much. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.